So the date today, July 4th, 2025, it's obviously a big day for celebration in the U.S. Freedom, independence.
Right. Traditionally it is. But, well, for a growing number of people, that celebration, it feels kind of hollow this year.
Yeah, that's the core tension, isn't
Yeah.
it? There's this feeling, and our source today really nails it, that American freedom is somehow disappearing.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at this really powerful article from The Guardian.
How to celebrate the 4th of July when American freedom is disappearing. That's the title.
Yeah, written by three very respected legal professionals,
Yeah.
Deborah Archer, Song Richardson, and Susan Stone.
Okay, so what's our mission with this deep dive?
We really want to unpack their argument. We'll look at the history, those contradictions baked into July 4th itself. Then we'll examine the challenges to democracy they're seeing right now.
Okay.
And I think most importantly, we want to pull out their message of hope and, the concrete things they suggest people can do.
Right, actions outside the usual channels, like courts or politics.
Exactly, to actually advance democracy and equity.
And hopefully, as we go, we can highlight some of those, aha moments for you, the listener, ideas for how you can maybe see your own role in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start there. This feeling that July 4th feels hollow. The authors say it's not exactly a new feeling for everyone, right?
That's a key point they make right away. They emphasize that particularly for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, well, they've always lived with that gap.
The gap between the promise of American democracy and the lived reality of being excluded.
Precisely. For these communities, this contradiction, it's not new. It's baked into the country's history.
And they use Frederick Douglass to make that point historically, don't they? His 1852 speech.
What to the slave is the 4th of July? Yes! It's such a powerful anchor for this discussion.
Absolutely devastating critique of that hypocrisy back then.
And the authors draw a direct line from that historical hypocrisy to today. They talk about it being a continuum.
A continuum? How so? What are the modern echoes they point to?
Well, things like, persistent racial disparities in wealth, health, housing, policies that still effectively create segregation, the idea that some people have a kind of second-class citizenship, and that rights aren't always protected equally for everyone.
So it's history, but it's also very much present.
Very much so. It's foundational to the challenges they see now.
Okay, so if that contradiction has always been there, what makes this moment feel different, according to them? They use the phrase dangerous backslide.
Right. They argue that just when it seemed like maybe the country was starting to reckon with some of this history, maybe move towards repair, we're now seeing this active pushback, this anti-democratic campaign, as they call it.
What does that look like, according to the article?
Well, they detail several things: growing hostility from the federal government towards even discussing race and racism.
Right. We've seen examples of that.
An active dismantling of protections that were hard-won over decades, erosion of civil rights, stoking racial division politically.
And they mention weaponizing the law.
Yes, that's crucial. Using legal systems not to promote justice, but actually to silence dissent or disempower certain communities.
Wow. And they describe this whole trend as an inversion of democracy. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, it's a striking image. It means power is flowing upward, consolidating at the top instead of flowing outward to the people.
Making it harder for regular folks to have a say, to see their needs reflected.
Exactly. Decisions get made further away. Influence concentrates.
And they say this affects everyone, not just the communities that have historically been marginalized.
That's a really important point they make. The chilling effects, they ripple outwards.
How so?
People losing jobs, organizations losing funding, a general loss of trust in institutions that maybe people once saw as, pillars of democracy.
So it's a broader impact.
Definitely. And what's kind of, well, maybe fascinating isn't the right word, but what's significant is that this backlash is making a truth very clear to more people.
What truth is that?
The truth that marginalized communities have known all along. America's stated ideals don't always line up with its actions. For many, it's a wake-up call.
Okay, so that paints a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
But then they pivot, right? There's a line that really jumped out at me.
Which one?
Still, despair is not a strategy. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yes, that's the crucial turn. Despite everything they've laid out, they refuse to end on a note of despair.
It's a call to action.
Absolutely. They emphasize that democracy isn't just handed down, it's built and rebuilt by people who show up.
In their communities, workplaces, schools.
Segregations, yep. People determined to make that promise of freedom real. Their core argument is that the most powerful response is actually grassroots.
And this is where, coming from legal scholars, it gets really interesting. They specifically ask,
what can people do to advance democracy and equity outside of the courts?
right. It seems almost counterintuitive for lawyers to say, look beyond the courts.
It really shifts the focus, and their first answer is fundamental. Do not retreat.
Don't give in to the disillusionment.
Exactly. Overcome that feeling and, crucially, recognize what they call our linked fate.
Linked fate. Across different groups.
Yeah, across race, class, generation, geography. Because, as they put it, authoritarianism thrives on disengagement and disconnection.
So staying connected, recognizing we're in it together, is itself an act of resistance.
That's the idea. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? For you, the listener. How might seeing things through that lens of linked fate change your perspective? Or maybe even your actions?
That's a powerful question. And they offer another way to kind of stay energized, right? Seeing this moment not just as a crisis, but
an opportunity to transform our democracy, reframing the challenge.
Yeah, and they have this really cool strategy for doing that, the vantage point of the future.
Ah, yes. I loved this part. It's quite innovative.
Explain that. How does it work?
So instead of asking the usual question, okay, given how things are now, what should we do? Which can feel really limiting.
Right, you get stuck in the current problems.
Exactly. They suggest flipping it. Imagine the future you want a truly just, equitable democracy. Assume you've achieved it.
Okay.
And then ask yourself, looking back from that future, what did we do starting today to make this vision real?
Wow. Okay. That really opens things up, doesn't it?
Right.
Lets you think beyond the immediate obstacles.
Totally. It creates space for new possibilities. So from that future perspective, the questions become different.
Like, where can I connect today?
Where can I act today?
What kind of change agent am I willing to be today to get us to that future?
Exactly. It's about identifying those immediate, actionable steps grounded in a long-term vision.
And a key part of that action, they say, involves engaging the people most affected by injustice.
Yes, bringing them into the decisions that shape their lives, really paying attention in our own institutions or communities to who's thriving and, well, who isn't.
And then doing the work to rethink those systems.
That's it. That's grassroots democracy in practice.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical and, honestly, quite inspiring. They don't just leave it theoretical. They give concrete examples.
They do, and they're great examples. One involves Columbia law students working with high schoolers in Harlem and Queens.
What were they doing?
Just teaching them how local government works. Simple, but it's that first step towards civic engagement, empowering young people.
That's fantastic. What else?
There's the Folded Map Project in Chicago by an artist-activist named Tonica Johnson.
Oh, I think I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's brilliant. She paired residents from the mostly black South Side with their map twins on the mostly white North Side people living at the same address number, but on opposite sides of the city.
And the goal was?
To expose the stark inequities between neighborhoods through personal connection. It built relationships, fostered understanding across racial lines, and sparked coalitions demanding change. It made systemic issues very personal.
Wow. That's powerful. They also mention work happening more quietly.
Right, sort of under the radar. On college campuses, for instance, where maybe official diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, DEI, have been cut.
Yeah, that's happening in a lot of places.
So faculty and staff are forming these informal groups, these coalitions, just to keep the work going, to collaborate on equity issues and fight against what the authors call institutional amnesia.
Meaning like stopping the progress from being forgotten or erased.
Exactly. It's a form of quiet, persistent resistance.
Incredible. And even within the justice system itself.
Yeah, they mention court systems in several states actually building partnerships, judges, lawyers, community members, working together to tackle racial disparities in access to justice.
So change can happen even within traditional structures.
It seems so. And then there's the Indianapolis Rethink Coalition example.
Right, the highway project. Tell us about that one.
So the state had this plan to rebuild a major highway that cut through the city. Standard procedure, right?
Yeah, usually about traffic flow engineering.
But this coalition saw it as an opening, a chance to shift the whole conversation, not just about roads, but about community renewal, addressing past harms caused by the original highway construction.
Okay, interesting pivot. How did they do it?
This is the really key part, connecting back to their main theme. Their strategy wasn't just having a good idea, it was about democratizing the process.
How?
They worked to get planning tools, data, technical know-how directly into the hands of the community members living there.
So residents weren't just being consulted after the fact.
Exactly. They were empowered to actually lead the planning, to shape the project based on their needs and vision. That's a fundamental shift in power.
That's a fantastic example of putting people at the center.
It really is.
And all these examples, the authors say, they keep people grounded in something they call radical hope.
Yes. Which isn't just, wishful thinking. It's a belief in the possibility of real transformation, even when the odds seem stacked against you.
It sounds like a very active kind of hope. Yeah. Defiant, almost.
I think so. It's the practice of democracy, like they say, not just the theory.
And the crucial thing is that practice is available to everyone.
That's their point.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a special title or position. It's about using your agency right where you are.
So bringing it all together,
yeah.
What's the main takeaway for us, for the listener?
I think the core message is pretty clear. As these attacks on democracy get louder, maybe more organized, more entrenched, it becomes even more critical to act. Right where you are, with whoever you can connect with. Don't wait.
It's not just about defending what exists.
No, although that's part of it, defending what they call the fragile, unfinished project of building a multiracial democracy.
But it's also looking forward.
Yes. Taking the time to actually dream, to envision what a better, more robust democracy would look like. And then taking the next best step you can see towards that vision today, without being paralyzed by the current challenges.
And the hope is that if enough people do this, engage across differences at all levels.
These actions can actually add up. They can build towards that reimagined nation.
A nation that finally lives up to its promises, where maybe July 4th can be celebrated without that feeling of contradiction.
That's the ultimate vision they offer. It's powerful and it puts the agency back in our hands.
It really does. It's a call to participate actively.
A reminder that democracy needs constant tending.
Well, that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We started with that feeling of July 4th being hollow for some.
Explored the history, the current backslide.
But landed on these really empowering grassroots ways to actively participate to rebuild and reimagine democracy. It's heavy stuff, but honestly, quite inspiring too.
I agree. They offer a way forward beyond just critique.
So, to leave you, our listener, with something to chew on, let's go back to that vantage point of the future idea. Thinking from that future where democracy is thriving, where things are more just. What next best step, however small, could you take, starting today, to help build that reimagined nation?
A great question to reflect on.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for the conversation.